Aishmai Sedahi Kroisoi Chris Doey, what is cracking, ladies, gents, boys and girls, anyone who is anyone, and anyone living down the Ambo. Today we are talking about something a little bit special, something a little bit awesome, something a lot awesome. We are talking about The Dragon's Virtue, written by Nicola Quinn. Now this book in particular is special because this is the book that inspired me to write my own book. So I have this book to thank, and I have the author to thank for, you know, helping me create my own book, my own world. And I got news about that, but it's going to come right at the end of the video because I don't want to distract, I don't want to take away from The Dragon's Virtue, the whole topic of this video. And to hype the book up even more, this book was going to be the book that kicks off my Indie Author Week that I had planned for like about a year now. It's just I never actually got around to doing it, and the boys on 4chan, they are powerhouses when it comes down to writing. I don't know if they just write like $5 at a time then pump them out like every few months or whatever, but all my videos are now out of date, and you know, it's a lot of reading, so yeah, we're just doing The Dragon's Virtue, the book, the video subject, and I was going to kickstart that week off. So yeah, this book is actually pretty dang special. But we're a minute into the video, so let's actually get into it. Let's get into The Dragon's Virtue by Nicola Quinn. So, first things first, I'm a realist. Let's look at the cover. On the cover, you're going to see Kayla herself, the main protagonist from the book. And there's fire, there's water, what's not to love? It's just a nice fantasy cover. It's a nice fantasy cover. You get to see the protagonist. You know what she sort of looks like then throughout the rest of the book. And yeah, there's not really much to say. It's a decent cover. It sets the tone. All in all, pretty good, pretty good. You flip that bad boy around, you read the blurb, you look at the back of the book, and what does it say? It says, "The wind brushes her face, air clears her lungs, and as time echoes, an unmissable destiny unravels upon the lands of Camelot. Two orphans, bound by fate, sealed by the dead, live in harmony until time turns red, forcing Kayla and Redditor apart. But separation is not eternal, and as the land airs back in anticipation of war, legend calls upon the lost dragons to save Camelot and keep it in the history books forever." That's pretty good, not gonna lie, that's pretty good. And it gets you sort of hyped up for the book, gets you hyped up for the story, and for me personally, I think it feels reminiscent of maybe some of the old Dragon Age games where you'd have like this awesome, intense sort of like intro, and then you thrust into the game. It's pretty cool, and it'll get you pretty pumped. I'm quite pumped, and I've read the book, so let's actually talk about the book. But before you actually get into the book, there's acknowledgements, there's words from the author. The book took about 8 years to write, and you sort of see the love and care that has been put into the book. At no point do you ever feel like the author's just writing for the sake of writing. It all feels like they're writing with a purpose, like they're enjoying what they're writing, if that makes any sort of sense, because I know for certain that I've read some books where you can just tell that the author's writing just to sort of make the story go along instead of writing what they enjoy. If that makes sense. Who knows, but what I'm saying makes sense to me. You can tell that there's a lot of love and care put into this book. So the main protagonist in this book is Kayla, and she's this badass young woman who just sort of lives with a dragon in a cave. And the character herself is actually pretty cool. She reads sort of like a D&D character, if that makes sense, in the sense that she is powerful, she is cool, she's very much the main character of the book, which is a really stupid thing to say because she literally is the main character of the book. So follow her, she goes through her trials and tribulations, and she does develop to become a stronger character by the end of the book, both, I suppose, emotionally, personally, and physically. She becomes a stronger character. You're introduced to her when she's orphaned at the age of 5 by Uther Pendragon, who's on a quest to absolutely snuff out all of the magic in the world, in the realm, because she blames magic for killing his family instead of him, because he's the one actually to blame. And so obviously Kayla's family is just like obliterated. Kayla runs off into a cave, and then she sort of cuts her hand on an egg, and that egg turns out to be Redditor. Redditor is sort of like this badass massive dragon who looks scary, who sounds scary, who's cool as anything, but he's like 14. So you've got this sort of like thing where you've got this impressive monster of a character who's also a teenager, and it's sort of like following a woman and a pet cat. It's great, it's fantastic. I do actually enjoy the characters themselves. Redditor obviously being like one of the only dragons in the realm is kind of cool, and Kayla sort of uses him as her the trick up her sleeve kind of thing to turn the odds of battle in her favour, especially when she's outnumbered. And we see this quite a lot in the book, and it's always interesting. It's always a treat reading about a dragon tearing some dude up, because it's just cool. But yeah, you know, the way these two characters interact with each other is great. You know, there's a platonic love that's mentioned in the forward before the book actually starts, but sometimes it does feel a little bit more bland. It feels a little bit more than platonic, if you get what I mean. It sort of feels like there's maybe a different kind of tension there. But both characters have spent more or less all their life together, so you know, it's sort of like seeing like family members, and their relationship, their friendship, or whatever you want to call it, their bond is sort of tested, and it creates this nice little bit of, it's an opportunity for both characters to develop and mature, and they both develop and mature. It's actually written quite well. There is like a third main character called Gawain, and he's one of King Arthur's knights, and he's sort of like, here's what he is. He's sort of meant to be this like absolute stud, and Kayla's dreaming about him. But like when you actually meet them, it seems like he's knowingly borrowed money that he knows he can't pay it back, but then he goes and antagonizes the guy he's lent money from, harasses the guy, and then when the guy's like, look, I brought all these guys, can I just have my money back? They're all killed, which sort of like put Gawain in like a permanent bad light, which it is funny, it is interesting, but it's kind of like, yikes, this guy isn't a nice person. But I'd say those are the three main characters. Now onto the setting. The setting is Camelot, Camelot, and it just feels like traditional British fantasy. Now when I say traditional British fantasy, ooh, that was a bit of a tongue twister. What I mean is, like, it just feels like, you know, like Games Workshop early 70s era, where the grass is goblin green, the sky is like ultramarine blue. There's green grass, blue skies. The easiest way to show you what I mean without showing you pictures of Warhammer or Paul Breach is to show you some box art from some traditional Lego castle sets, because this is what I mean. Like, the sky is blue, the grass is green, it's in the middle of a field, there's very little in the distance, and it's just beautiful, it's wholesome, it feels oddly liminal, but I love it. And going from fighting fantasy to the Dragon's Virtue, because at the time when I first read this book, that's exactly what I did, and I read the book in like 2 seconds. It just felt like you could go from, I don't know, the town of Anvil in Fighting Fantasy to Camelot, just across the bridge, and you're still in the same sort of realm. It's still that high fantasy era, because in the Dragon's Virtue now, there are mermaids, there are dragons, and it's not hard to believe that maybe there are goblins in the woods. I don't know, it's never actually been confirmed by the author herself, but it is what it is, and I love the setting for it, and I love that traditional British fantasy setting. It's just lovely, it's so wholesome, and it feels nostalgic, oddly nostalgic. And like, I'm incredibly selective with the books that I read, so when I read this, I was so happy to see that there wasn't any politics whatsoever involved. It was just pure, raw, unadulterated fantasy, and it delivered on that. It was so beautiful to read, it was so fun to read, and I read it in 2 seconds because I was enjoying the book that much. Growing up, I was an absolute deviant. I say deviant, that's probably got some dodgy connotations. I was an absolute nerd for werewolves, so when I read this book and I found, get it, were-dragons, that's just awesome, man. That's just cool. And if that doesn't encourage you to read the book, I don't really know what will. One thing I will say though is that when you're introduced to Kayla for the first time, as she is in the book kind of thing, not as she is when she's 5, as she is when she's 19, the first thing you really see her do is kill 6 men, and there really isn't any context to the altercation. Now, as a fan of like Black Library, the Warhammer books, I absolutely love crunchy combat. I love combat whatsoever in books. But like, these guys could have just been looking for like lost sheep or something, a lost child from their village, and then Kayla's just like killing them, and they die horrible deaths. These guys have horrible deaths, and it just creates up this setting where Kayla's just low-key a bit of like a psycho. And this actually crops up again now with Gawain, like I mentioned earlier. He like borrows money from a bloke. He knows he's never going to pay him back. He knows he's not going to pay him back, and he antagonizes the guy later on when he wants the money back. But then when he's like, look, can I just have my money back, please? Otherwise my boys here are just going to beat you up. And then they kill all of them, and it's like, what? Like, they were morally in the right. Like, they were morally right in wanting their money back. And it just sort of like, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Like, killing isn't the only option. It would have just made more sense to let these guys beat up Gawain, take the money, and then Kayla could have nursed Gawain back at the health kind of thing, and then it could have shown more of a vulnerability in Arthur's prestige knights. And I don't know, it just felt weird seeing these guys get killed when they were actually in the right. Like, the book's okay, Kayla's a great character, it's just like, some of these like altercations could have done with some context. Like, there could have been like a reason behind it. Maybe like in the introduction when these 6 men attack Kayla, they could have been following her, they could have been tracking her for some time, so then she could have objectively said, look, these guys are going to kill me, I need to kill them first, instead of it just leaving up like it's quite vague. And then with Gawain, with the guys, it's like, maybe if it was a case of Gawain was kind of shafted and this guy charged him insane interest rates and he just genuinely couldn't afford it back, and then that's why they were killing him, he's like a loan shark. Yeah, okay, but like a lot of the time it just feels like people are being killed without there being any questions asked. They're just being killed for existing, and it's kind of like, it's funny, but it's a bit like, oof, it's a bit like Murder Hobo vibes from D&D. That's like the only thing that's a bit iffy about the book. You know, it's a good book. It is a good book. And as it's Quinn's first book, you know, there are going to be grammatical errors. It's an independently published, I think through Amazon, that kind of thing, which is exactly what I did with mine. So there are some grammatical errors. There's like a grammatical error in mine that I'm aware of right now. It's just one of them things that happens, you can't really snuff it out. But it is what it is, especially when you could tell that Quinn enjoyed writing the book. You can tell that she enjoyed writing every moment of the book, and that it meant a lot to her to get the book out into the world. And the book is available on Amazon right now if you are interested in, you know, perusing, having a gander, maybe purchasing a copy for yourself. And of course there'll be a link in the description. So all in all, my verdict is that the book's actually pretty good. It's a good fantasy book. It's a traditional fantasy book, if that makes sense, where you are in the kingdom of Camelot and the grass is very green, the sky is very blue, Paul Breach isn't in the book, and it's just nice. It's nice, it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a fun book to read. It's a solid book to read, and all in all I would probably recommend it. And usually I sort of like give a rundown of the story, but I didn't want to do it this time because like I felt like I was just spoiling too much. So yeah, the book is pretty good. I'd recommend getting it. And before I go, I just wanted to say something about Brinsgrove. I've got a Wattpad story going on right now. Ideally, I'm thinking the next Brinsgrove project, and it is in the work. It's going to follow like 5 survivors as they sort of go through the events of Brinsgrove. But right now we got Tammy's Tale on Wattpad, which is sort of going to be like the 6th survivor kind of thing, where her story, it's sort of like a taste as to what you're going to get times 5. But yeah, it might actually be in the book that sort of connects Brinsgrove 1 and 2 and adds a lot of more context to the actual world of Brinsgrove, to the events, to the characters, and so on and so forth. As of right now, Tammy is in Brinsgrove. She's just encountered her first creature, and the creature draws more inspiration from like analog horror rather than, you know, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, the stuff that I was going for in the first book. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. Feel free to check it out. It's a snippet of what you can expect in Brinsgrove, and I'm going to leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. So without further ado, I like The Dragon's Virtue by Nicola Quinn. And I recommend that you check it out too. So, take care guys. Live, laugh, love. Ta-ra.